In today's rapidly changing world, Nigerian youth are navigating political apathy, cultural disconnection, and growing frustration with systems that seem to forget them. But in forgetting history, we risk losing our identity, our power, and our potential. And as global citizens and future leaders, can we really or truly move forward without first looking back? What lessons from our past that we must reclaim to actually build a future rooted in purpose and pride? So let's explore why history is more than a subject and why some people regard it as a repertoire for one's identity and ancestral documentation. This is Fafana Africa, and I am Lekon Onabanjo. You're welcome. From the empires of Benin and Kanem-Bornu to the resistance of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti and the youth-led EndSARS movement, Nigerian history is rich with examples of courage, leadership, and change. But how many young people truly know these stories? If we don't teach, remember, and reclaim our history, we risk repeating its darkest chapters. And what does it mean to know your roots? And what power does that knowledge unlock? Today, we examine why understanding our past is essential for shaping a better and more united Nigeria. And so today, our guests on the show are thought leaders, educators, and youth advocates who are actually passionate about culture, civic engagement, and national development. And I'm joined by Odunayo Akinremi, who is a personal branding coach in history and a strategic studies student at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for coming around.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here. Of course,
you're welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have Maurice, Ebam, who is a lawyer and human rights advocate. And he also joins me from Lagos. Maurice, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Calm down, it's fun.
Okay, so hoping we'll be able to get Maurice Ebam to join us during the course of the conversation. I'm going to start with you, Odunayo. Now, how does knowing our pre-colonial history talk about the empires, the culture, the tradition, the leadership, and all that? How does knowing all that actually affect us as youths and how we grow up?
Yes, that is a very beautiful question. But I would like to answer that question by first defining what is history. Because most times we don't study history because we don't really know what history is. And history is not just the study of the past. History is our identity. History is our culture. History is what we own. History is in our language. History is in what we do. History helps people to know where they are coming from, why they are where they are, and where they are going through. So when we don't study history, we don't really know who we are, where we are, and how we've become who we are today. But the study of history helps us to know who we are, helps us to know that we are not just victims of colonialism, helps us to know that we're not just victims, and helps us to know how we've become what we are. So the study of history actually helps us to understand what can be done, what has been done in the past, and how not to repeat the mistakes of the past. So the study of history, especially our pre-colonial history, helps us to become powerful in what we do. It helps us to own our identity, own our culture, and our language. And history is not just what we study in school. History is in our everyday life, in the names we call our children, in the language, in the things we do in our culture. So I think that study really helps us to understand and to own our power, our superpower, and tell our own unique story in the way it should be told. Because if you don't tell your story, you give other people the room to tell your story for you. And when people tell your story for you, they define the narrative. So I think we need to start defining our own narrative at this time and in this season.
Oh, definitely. We're going to talk more about our narratives and the cues and the different shifts that we've heard over the years. But then I'll take it back to the point where you talked about we are not defined by our colonial past. And we know that history has made us understand that Africa was actually did dirty by the colonialists in time past. But then I'd like to understand, for you, what would you say were the most significant misses for Africa as at the time that the colonialists came in that we are still struggling with in this modern era?
One of the things we missed out is allowing other people to tell our history for us, just like I said. And in today's world, we already have the rise of African historiography, which is the study of African history. Because when other people write our own history for us, it causes them to say the narrative. And you know, when people say your narrative, they define what happens. So in what is most important for us is we start to inculcate our pre-colonial history. The history of Africa do not just start when colonialism came or when the European came to Africa. Our history started way before then. We have the history of the 17th century, the 15th century, even up to the 8th century if you want to know. So those histories are stuck in book. But what we need to do is to dig up this fact and start telling the next generation, because they need to know what happened. Because if they don't know what happened, they might never be able to appreciate why it happened or what has happened in the past.
Okay, thank you so much, Odunayo. I understand that we have Maurice Ebam, who is a lawyer and a human rights advocate. Of course, we can see him on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us, Maurice. Can you please unmute?
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good Africa. Yes, hi. Good day. It's so exciting to be here. First of all, I want to say God bless my sister in the studio with you, God. I heard her speak and I felt proud to be an African youth at this time, a Nigerian youth at this time. She made me, you don't understand, that is an asset. And sister, I am open. It's time for us to unite. We need to start collaborating. We that have this consciousness. You don't understand. Like, for you enough, if they knew what you were saying, if they could really sit down to listen to, I heard everything you say. Like you have made the journey easier for us.
Maurice, thank you so much for...
I have found my purpose on earth.
Yeah, thank you so much for that preamble. Thank you. So I also have Maiyegun Quam, who is an educator and a policy strategist, is also on our virtuals. Thank you so much, Maiyegun, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to join you here, especially on this important topic, as this state that we are as Africans, as Nigerians, as youth. We delve into the education aspect of it to see why African youth should take the lessons of history and be able to use it to transform the society.
Okay, we are going to talk more on that, because that's actually the focus on the show. But then let me quickly take Maurice's, your perception as regards history, most especially how it has affected Africa and has actually shaped the knowledge and the ideation of the African youth.
Very, very much once again. I'll start with an African parable. They say, until the lion starts telling his own tales of the hunts, the glory always goes to the hunter. That is the summary of all our sister was saying there in the studio. Until we start putting down the story, until we, the young people of Africa, we must go back to our roots. You understand? Root is where we are coming from. And it's really a divine purpose. We are alive at a time like this, not by coincidence, but by divine mandate, whether you like it or not. We are here at the point we are existing at this moment that I am right now on Africa, and I have my wonderful guest there in the studio, and our anchor is there. We are appearing on News Central as a divine mandate, and I want to first of all say thank you, Afafuna Africa, for this honor and privilege.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I remember the time I see you on the screen, my fellow. I represent there, and I fantasize about being on the screen. It shows that as young people we are connecting. There's an invisible thread connecting all of us. I'm happy I heard my sister talking. I will say finally. We know that we need more young women like that. We have young people, women, youth, and everyone, the elites, the less privileged. Is that elite? You must understand that we must put aside every other thing. Well, nobody gets in this. Nobody stays alive in this world. We are going to leave this earth one day. And we are going to go back to the earth. We are going to go back to motherland. And they call Africa our motherland. And I am in Nigeria because I'm an African. We have the African Agenda 2063. And I want to say one of the media stations, not out of psychophancy, one of the media stations or any organization in Nigeria and Africa that is promoting Pan-Africanism is Pan Africa. I will not lie to you. I know, I follow you. I see when you torchlight other African nations.
Maurice,
and it's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I can see that you're actually mesmerized by News Central and what we've been doing to actually project the image of Africa in a positive light. And of course, Odunayo would agree with me. Thank you so much for that. So let me quickly talk to Maiyegun as at this time. Let me also get your perspective of what our history has been, the colonial past, and how it has actually shaped our upbringing, you know, as youths, and of course, for the African continent.
Okay, thank you very much for that wonderful question. As about the 12th, 13th, 14th century, African people are people living in peace, in harmony, engaging in their own trade, engaging in their own diplomatic relations. We are people of love. We are people that we embrace communism. We are people that we live peacefully in our own way. But ever since the 15th century, history took a turning point since we interacted with the Europeans from the days of the Portuguese to the days of the Dutch, from their entry to Edo. And ever since the 16th century, we witnessed tragedy, historical tragedy of African people, whereby the obnoxious transatlantic slave trade decided to change not only the demography of African, but our socio-cultural life. Our forefathers were exported as cargoes from 1542, 1600, 1700, up to the early 19th century. The story changed, our history changed. Then after that, we transitioned to the colonial regime. That is, from the beginning of the 19th century, after we were used about 300 years as people captured, we still went under colonialism, whereby foreign culture, European culture, distorted our own African tradition and culture. So many things are not our own that we do. As I'm waxing eloquently in English, this is not my native language. I'm a Yoruba, and Maiyegun Quam loruko mi.
Okay.
So all of these are our history that has changed our culture, our demography, our society, and made us what we are today, and changed our mentality entirely. That is our background, and this is what has led us to where we are right now.
So I understand. So Odunayo, we can actually put it in perspective of the experiences that we've had to share while our forefathers grew up, the excruciating pain, the deprivation, the suffering, the slavery, and so many rights being taken away from people. But then we've not really had the opportunity to have these documented in our history properly, the way it was actually done. At some point, we even had history being removed from our curriculum in school. So we don't have enough documentation, and we don't even have people who are custodians of these particular historical stories, so to speak, translate it or transmit it to our children or to our kids in school while growing up. But then one would ask the question, how has the removal and the reintroduction of history, how has it affected schools and affected the youths when it comes to having some sort of civic consciousness?
That is a very important question. And that is something we should discuss and keep asking. You know, it's something we should keep advocating for. Because, you know, sometimes I am a student of history and strategic study, and there is a reason why it's not just called history. It is called strategic study, because history empowers me to be strategic to the future. So, and the truth is, if you don't know, there's an adage that says that people who do not know the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat it. So one of the things, one of the anomaly that has happened in our generation is the removal of history in our curriculum. And what that does to us, it creates apathy. Because when you do not know what people have fought for in the past, you do not even know why to uphold it or why it is important. When you don't know what past heroes like Obafemi Awolowo, what's his name, Nelson Mandela, when you don't know what they fought for, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, when you do not know what those people have gone through to bring you to where you are today, you don't even know why you should keep it and fight for it. So that is what is causing, that is one of the major reasons we have political apathy in our work today, because we don't even know why we should do what we should do. Most Nigerians don't even know why they should go to the ballot boxes. They don't know what has happened in the past, what brought us to where we are today. So history should be returned to our curriculum at all levels, and I advocate that it's not European history, African history. There is a lot of African history. We have the history of Mansa Musa, the king of Mali, who was a prosperous king in the late 8th century to the 13th century. Those histories should be brought back to our curriculum, not European history. Learning African history, because when you don't know what has happened in the past, you're doomed to repeat that same mistake because you do not become strategic towards what you're doing in the future, because you don't even know who you are. You don't even know your identity. You don't even know what has happened in the past and has brought you here where you are today. So I think it is an anomaly in this generation, and it should be brought back across all, across all our systems of education, primary education, secondary education, the university. It should be a compulsory subject, even at that. Because when we don't know what has happened in the past, we cannot be able to know why we should forge ahead, why we should go into governance, why you should take up education, why you should take up economy, why you should be an activist in your company, in your country, because you don't know what has happened in the past. And the truth is, you know, we keep saying things like, let people learn how to speak good English. Like one of the speakers said, Maiyegun Quam. You know, we call akara bean cake. Akara is akara. If you go to search on things like AI, you will see the word abetiaja. You will see the description, and I'm like, what is this? The word it is our word. But when we do not put it out there, we allow other people to define what our word is for us. So I think it should be returned. African indigenous languages should also be compulsory in school, not just English language is a beautiful language, and I love that it's a unifying factor for us. But we should also embrace our indigenous language, and that's one of the reasons I love my name. I am Odunayo. I don't want to be Kate. I don't want to have any other name. That is my culture. That is my identity. And until I start to embrace it, then I cannot start to really live fully. So I think that's what I can say on the curriculum being returned into our educational system.
Well, this is one lady that knows her onions, and she's a proud African, so I must say. Maurice, so let me just also get your perspective as regards the removal of history from school curriculum. It was actually removed in 2009, reintroduced into the school system this year, actually, by this current administration. But do you think that was actually deliberate to actually change our identity and orientation?
Blame them. This elderly was not all of them can. Most of them is to disappoint. But let me go back to the root cause of everything. It is that we don't know who we are. We don't know ourselves. So let me give you play you a little story and scenario, and just bear with me, every Nigerian out there. Africa is not a mistake. Africa is in the Bible. If you go to the Old Testament, you hear that when God created 4 rivers, one passed through the land of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is in Africa. So let me start from there. Let me just start from there first. So first of all, Africa. I have my own theory that Africa is in heaven is, or the kind of it is in Africa. That is why the kind of things that happen in this continent, it happens on other continents. It's not going to that. They cannot survive it. It shows you that why Africa does different. So let us start from there now. Then we talk about Egypt. Egypt is in the Bible. Egypt is in Africa. So civilization started from Africa. I come from Cross River State. In Africa, we have the NCBD. Yes, I'm an Ejagan man. Itung local government area of Cross River State. I'm an Ejagan man. We have the NCBD. The NCBD is an indigenous ancient writing. It's the second oldest writing in Africa after the Egyptian hieroglyphics. How many Africans know this? Man, know thyself. Man, know thyself. We Africans, we don't know ourselves. So let me tell you about Nigeria. Nigeria is the most populated black nation in the world. Nigeria is the giant of Africa. No be cho. It's a reality. The thing is that once Nigeria gets it right, Africa gets it right. We don't even, that is why in Nigeria we don't even know Nigeria is why it pains me now at this 2025 in June 2025. Nigeria is even to get the barest minimum thing selecting our right leaders. And we young people are at the forefront. That is why I was excited when I heard my sister over there in the studio speak so intellectually sounding way. I was excited. I had always told you my admiration for Africa. I have always been a fan because I understand it's all about a divine mandate. Africa is rising. How many Nigerians know about African Agenda 2063? I say SDG 2030 is not realistic for Nigeria and Africa. In the next 5 years, SDG will expire. But do we know we have the African Agenda 2063, the Africa we want? And when I advocate for African Agenda 2063, people tell me, Barrister Maurice, Ebam, are you going to be alive in 2063? I say, leave that one. It's about legacy. It's about legacy. How many of us are really aware of ourselves? We know who we are. We don't even know. So that is why I thank once again New Central for Africa. When I say I do that, I thank you. I am not saying that of psychophancy because I understand. If you know the tax ahead, and it's exciting that we are young people. The presenter and anchor is a young person. The guests are young people. I'm excited as young people. Genuinely, we're having these conversations. Genuinely, selflessly, we're having this conversation. And
now, Maiyegun, talking about the task ahead now, let's pivot from there. How can storytelling and oral history be used to teach young people about our roots?
Thank you very much. I'm really concerned about the education part of the issue, history. First, how do we teach history effectively? In education, we have 3 main domains of learning. You have the cognitive, where you identify, and we have the affective domain, whereby you feel, what is being taught to you. And we also have the last one, which is the psychomotor domain, which is to make movements and take action. Generally, our education system, the way we teach our young ones are not that really effective. I've attended the 3 main types of tertiary institutions, College of Education, University Polytechnic, and it is sad that in tertiary institutions that history is a course, this domain are not observed. It is not about telling people it happened in 1652, your forefathers were enslaved, 1700 this happened. Do you feel it? What is the affective domain? Our lecturers setting curriculum and assessing students on how they utilize the knowledge they have. If you look at history curriculum course outline, if the affective domain, which is the part that you feel it penetrates deeply into your system, almost all history students will be held for every protest because you have read about pains. You know the cause of poverty, economic issue about Africa. You know it is in the curriculum. I'm also a student of history, but the challenge we have is not about just bringing the history back. Are we going to observe the technicalities of teaching these courses effectively so that people can rehearse? How do we actually imbue passion for it? I've went to some campuses, lecturer is lecturing history. It's just abstract. They are not seeing any visuals to display how Africans were in people. This thing is not penetrating into the innermost of all the students. So on the education side, where I would advocate for return of history across them, because when you go to almost all developed countries, same countries, I would say, from primary to tertiary education, even though you study engineering, history must be taken. Go to Japan, go to the United States of America,
go to Sweden, go to all parts of the world.
Okay, Maiyegun, I think we just we're having issues. We're having issues with quality communication from your end. Maybe something that we can both work on to ensure that we have sound quality from your end and we're able to hear you properly. But then thank you so much for helping us understand the fact that we have this politicization of our historical knowledge, and not only in our educational system, but we've also seen that also in the political sphere, basically in all social spheres of the African narrative, so to speak. And that brings me to the point where we get to understand what are the dangers of having to politicize our history. I mean, we know the facts, we know the attendant effects, we know what it will cause, we know the fact that it will erode our identity, but then we still allow those narratives to play out.
That is a very deep question because, you know, it happens a lot. And one of the reasons it happens is because maybe I should call it a nonchalant attitude, or because we do not care. That's why we politicize our history. But what happens is, at the end of the day, it's not just losing your identity. It makes you lack any story to tell. Because even at this age and time, I'm Gen Z, like they call it, you know, how many of people in my generation can tell the history of Nigeria well? So now, if we can't tell it, then how do we tell it to our children? How do our children pass it down to their children's children? And how does it move from one generation to another? And historians are working really hard in making sure history is being told as it happened. You know, most times in history, what we have is fragmentary evidences, and we bring it together. That is why history is deeper. It takes time to be able to tell history. So what happens when we politicize history is not just that we lose our identity, is that we lose ourselves. Because at the end of the day, there is nothing to be told. And, well, with this generation of things going live on social media and people want to get information, their first result is to ask AI or any of those tools. I don't want to mention name, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So when those narratives go far, that is a narrative that the next generation is going to believe, because their go-to tool for asking of questions are not elderly people. Like, I mean, when last did you ask your parents or your grandmother about the history of your family? So to even say asking them about the history of the nation, we don't even read books. Then we go ahead to politicize our history. We lose ourselves. And when we lose ourselves, we have nothing to give. And what happens is that at the end of the day, it's go ahead to affect the structural system of the country. It affects the way we are being perceived by the outside world. It affects the way Nigeria, another African country, appears to look in the international system. And we know those that tell their history controls the international system. So if we want to really move forward to stop being a developing country, to become a developed country, then the politicizing of history has to stop. We need to own it and be like, this is our thing. You know, if you politicize your history, then who wants to tell the real one? And we take it with levity, like nothing is going on. But we really need to start telling history just the way it is. No need to cover up the narrative. Let young people know. And I think young people also need to do better. We need to start going deep, trying to know more. I feel if we know more, there is a way we act when you know more. So I think the politicization of history should stop, please. We need to be at the forefront. We need to stop being a developing country and rise to the glory with which we've been glorified in the beginning. So I think that should stop.
Okay, so I like the part where you talked about people, those who actually know their history are the ones that control the scene, so to speak. And I'll just throw that to Maiyegun and get his thoughts. Now, in reclaiming history, we've seen tribes in Africa who actually know their history, but then they use that to dominate other ethnic tribes, most especially those who are actually lesser. And I wonder if what they know is actually a true representation of what actually speaks or to their past. Now, one will ask the question, does it mean that there are some historical facts that are probably distorted or corroded that makes some Africans want to use that to dominate other Africans? Maiyegun, I can't hear you. Is there a way you can unmute and talk to us?
Hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you, but you are not too clear.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
Okay, can you do without your earpiece? Is there a way you can do without your earpiece so that we can hear you properly?
Can you hear me now?
Beautiful. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So yes, history can be distorted. History can be written politically to favor a tribe, a particular country. In fact, the first set of history that were written on Africa were historian accounts of Africans. There are several historical books that you see, and it sympathizes with the Europeans. So if people do not get the actual facts, there is probability for manipulation of their own past. We've seen in Nigeria different tribes that come to say, oh, this is what happened, and that might not necessarily be the account, the real truth of what happened. As students of history, there's what we call historiography, which gives about the technicality of how the truth, objectivity to the core can be sourced, extracted, and written about a particular tribe. That is why, as my sister has said, the moment you allow someone to write your own history for you, then you are susceptible to manipulation. And that your susceptibility can affect both your economic life, political, and social life. So historical manipulation is a fact. It happens from the historian on how Africa has been before the likes of J.F. Ajayi and all of his sets from Ibadan began to reconstruct the truth about Africa. So the same thing within Nigeria, within other parts of Africa, history can be distorted, can be written to favor an agenda, which people should not allow. People should guide their own path, their own history jealously, because that is what will give them a sense of direction, a sense of agitation, a sense of negotiation in their affairs.
All right, so Maurice, I'd like to get your perspective to this. Now, when you look at the history of our social, political, and economic struggles, would you say that Africa is getting better or worse?
I will just oppose my answer with this preamble. Our foundations are very, very important. Foundations, what do you call foundation? That is why, if you notice that the people like Albert Macaulay, when Albert Macaulay died in service, one of the agitators for the creation of Nigeria. Since we are in the spirit of information sharing, I will recommend, please let me beg your permission, I will recommend a documentary series, called The Making of the African Colony. It's on Netflix. Sorry, that's I have to seek permission. When you watch it, we have a discussion. Because it's very, very important that we must seek. He that seeks will know. Ask shall be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock shall be opened to you. But as young people, we are now. How many young people are having this kind of conversation that we are having? You understand? How many young people are even aware that we should have this kind of conversations? So it's our awakening. That is why I say, Fafafina, Ipo are the one that held the ladder for us. I will not lie to you, because Fafafina have been doing these discussions for a long time. That's why I always bring it back to your platform. It's very, very important that, and this conversation should not end here. It should not be a one-off conversation, because we should throw, this is a mandate. This is, for they say, how do you know your purpose? That's the way they disturb you for arts. That's it, that because of it you cannot sleep well. That is your purpose. And one of our biggest problems, they say God bless us with everything, but cost us with leadership. Africa and Nigeria, when it comes to leadership, we don't understand. God bless us with everything. So as a young person, you cannot change the step from outside. You must get involved. And politics is very, very important. Young people must get involved in politics. I am a lawyer, but I'm also involved in politics. It's very, very important. Leadership is very, very important because we cannot talk, no be church. You cannot be talking, intellectual sound, intellectual. Come and do practical. It's where you go. Once we get our leadership right, we have solved 99% of our problem. So young people that are intellectually sound, come. It's a collaboration, not be competition matter. Because this is the journey to salvation. This is not a competition. Let us network and collaborate. All of us, that's why Papa Fina, please, and to all of us, let us continue this conversation. Let's have a better town hall. Who says we cannot move a topic like this and have a town hall? Invite us as resource persons, get sponsors. So it's information sharing. It's time for us to move the conversation from off the screen to reality.
All right, Maurice.
I'm in Abuja, but I understand politics is grassroots. I'm a young man.
All right, thank you so much, Maurice. Now, let's talk about action plan. Odunayo, pick it from where Maurice dropped it, saying that we need to start taking actionable steps now if we're going to get things right. So how do we begin to sanitize our ancestral codes and values to actually reflect our true identity?
That's a very good question, because we don't just have to keep talking. We need to move from the discussions to pragmatic things we need to do. And the first thing is that we need to own it. We need to believe it, and we need to be willing to communicate it. So the number one thing we need to do is, I own my history, I love my history, and I want to communicate it. We need to, form like a forum or a community where we have proud people who are proud to say, I am an African. And yeah, I know that Africa is developing, but I love Africa. I've been put in Africa for a reason, and I want to see Africa rise. So we need to push that mandate. They say like you're pushing an agenda. Like push is like you're pushing an agenda. And it starts from each one of us. Let's start from the family system. The family system where you say, my children cannot speak the indigenous language is wrong, please. Let's start by teaching our children their indigenous language. I'm not saying do not teach them English language. It is good. We use it in communication in school. In fact, that's what I'm using to communicate with you right now. But then, the children need to own their own indigenous language. So when I own my indigenous language, I know how beautiful it is, how sweet it is, and how to communicate with it. Then moving on from the family system, apart from indigenous language, the African culture should be established in our families. African, a Yoruba girl, you wake up, you kneel down to greet. It is not old-fashioned. It is my culture.
Gen Z's
I know, but that's my culture. It is something I should own. That was what I was born into, what I was raised into. And that's why I said we need to embrace it first, own it, and accept that it is ours before we now start to say we want to disseminate it. Okay, the culture of not greeting people or handshaking you, it's a culture, But the only thing is we have embraced it. So if I push my culture, that in my culture we kneel down to greet, other people can also embrace it. But if I'm not proud of that culture, then they have the right not to embrace it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So we should embrace it. That is our culture. It should be taught in families, in school, in other systems, in public gatherings. We should embrace it. This woke generation, please, don't let us be woke that we lose out on where we come from. Because a generation that do not know their past cannot even know their future. So if you think we are forging ahead in the direction of destiny in our future without going back to what has happened in the past, we may be losing it. So we need to embrace our culture. We need to embrace our history. This is who I am. I have been created in Nigeria for a reason. You cannot even change your DNA. At least even if you change your passport, your identity, you will not be able to change your DNA. Your DNA is Africa. So that is why you need to embrace the Africa system.
Okay, so that's quite interesting. So we're talking about Africa being rich, the fact that we need to own it, we need to be proud about it, we need to teach and transmit that to the generation now and the coming generation. But Maiyegun, I don't know how you would paint the picture of what values you would want us to first learn, inculcate, imbibe, transmit, most especially now when we're moving away from the familial system to something that is nationalistic, talking about building some kind of a movement for national independence. What are those core African values that you would love or you would want us to actually imbibe?
Thank you. Let me first appreciate Maureen for that, for his comments. Like you mentioned, how many people are having these conversations and all of those things. You know, something that we must look into. As Odunayo has also mentioned, you know, in the family system, we have our values. We have values of sharing. We are not Americans. We do not really believe in individualism. We don't leave things to individuals to handle on their own. We are people that believe in collectivism. We believe that when we come together, we do things together. There is a Yoruba adage that says, "Agbajo ọwọ́ la fi ń sọ̀yà." That adage translates in English that it is through collectivity, unionism, that we can be proud and courageous of ourselves. That adage does not just speak in its literary terms. It talks about our culture. So one of the values we begin to build from our family system is how to come together, love one another, assist each other. As Walter Rodney has said in his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, the success of an individual is tied to the society, and that is the fact. So we must begin to build this love, care for ourselves. That is who we were before the 1500s and after. We are people that we love to share things in the classroom, in the market. We should always embrace the sense of unity. We should always embrace a sense of love, a sense of belongingness, and a sense of common goal, common good. These are African culture. These are African values. In Africa, someone that steals money is condemned totally. We don't have several English for it. We don't have what we call a fraud. A thief is a thief. A criminal is a criminal, and it's totally condemned. In African culture, we don't have several names. So these are all of the values that we must begin to build. And political participation, as Maureen and Odunayo have said, we must participate. Our business is tied to the politics of the state. Our education is tied to the politics of the state. If you do not participate, and at the end of the day, people that does not have your interest as students are in several political positions, then you will not have a classroom that is technologically powered, that you can be at your house in Bariga and you listen to what is happening at a Unila campus. So you must participate in politics because it's tied to your education, it's tied to your business, it's tied to every facet of your life. So all of these values, we must begin to build it. And within our friends, we wake up in the morning, share insights about historical development. Don't wait for people. And like Maureen said, let us come together. Do we have a seminar? Do we have a conference? Because people like us, they are littered, they are scanty, but we are available. So we need to come together. We need to create study groups. We need to create a kind of relationship, as history has proven several times that the youth are critical to the development of a country. Study groups alone was critical to the development of Argentina as far back as the early 20th century when things were not going wrong. We've seen in Morocco, we've seen in several Middle East countries how students protest alone change things. So we've seen in America how protests and all of these things have helped them to bring about reform. So we must tell our young ones in the class, speak when you see things, communicate and strategize together. These are all of the values that I recommend for us as young people and as Nigerians. Thank you.
Thank you, Maiyegun. Maurice, I'll come to you in a while, but I want to quickly get Odunayo's reaction to this. Looking at what Maiyegun has said, way back in time, you mentioned a couple of personalities that actually did heroics, both in Africa and in Nigeria, that we celebrate today. We call them our heroes. You know, but when you look at what has happened in a couple of years in Nigeria now, talk about the end police brutality, end bad governance, and we have you two actually came out to say, see, we don't want this terrible way of governing people, of, so to speak, delivering democracy to people. We want some sort of a change. And these youths met resistance. Some of them were victimized, some of them were arrested, some of them were, you know, incarcerated, so to speak. How do we break that barrier? Because we see you two actually channel their inner strength, draw inspiration from their history and their past, but then they are hit with a brick wall by the so-called government. How do we break that barrier to see that we are able to drive a change that is better for all?
Okay. That is a very important question, because I get it. We are youth, and sometimes we come out to let our voices be heard on the global stage. But we hit a wall, like, how can we go further from this? And you know, you start hearing informations like, please protect yourself. If you die for Nigeria, nothing is going to happen to you. But the only way is that there is no country of the world that has ever had a revolution and has never been faced with a barrier. So things do not just come on a platter of gold. You would not just receive your revolution. Study history. If you study history very well, you see even these European countries we celebrate today, all of them have come this far because at a point in time, someone, somewhere decided to say, even though there is a wall in front of me, but I do not care what is going to happen, I'm still going to forge ahead until I'm able to do something important for my society. And that is why we have these heroes being celebrated today. So the question is, do we have that kind of mindset? Do we want to go beyond the barriers, or we already see the barriers as a wall that cannot be crumpled on? You know, when you have a mindset that this wall cannot come down, even though the wall has the ability for it to come down, it might never come down. But we have to have the mindset that, number one, it is normal for you to face resistance when you're trying to bring in new thing, a revolution. Something has lingered for a very long time. It has happened over time, over centuries, years and year in, year out. So you don't just expect that that revolution will be given to you on a platter of gold.
All right, so Maurice, so this is where we bring you in, Maurice. We need to understand, how do we now begin to drive policies and advocacies that guarantees the rights of the youth when they are channeling or charging a nationalistic path? What can be done to support our youth who are trying to draw strength and inspiration from their history to actually chart a cause of nationalistic growth for Africa and Nigeria?
So, thank you very much. A very, very good way. Starting from that, let me take you back to when Nigerian youth became very democratically active. 2020, October 10, 2020, the EndSARS. A lot of people argue for or nay, but I tell you that those are the heroes of the new Nigeria I talk about are my compatriots and brothers that died in Lekki Tollgate 2020. A lot of people argue against that. That is not what I was doing. It does not concern me. It's what I believe by conviction. Now, come down to young people. Our problem is a multifaceted problem. The older generations are there. The older generation caused the problem. There's an erosion of value system, etc., etc., etc. Older generation. I have never seen a work in Nigeria before. But those that went to school in those days, they talked about how they used to eat free chicken in their cafeterias and meal tickets. I never saw it. I've never benefited from Nigeria like this, apart from NYC that I did in Sokoto that I even work. That's the little I benefited from Nigeria. Even this, they say COVID-19, they were giving money. I did not even say anything.
All right, so
But it does not
Maurice,
change that I will not be
what I'm even trying to find
Our
out
biggest
is...
problem is lack of patriotism.
So,
Our biggest problem is...
Maurice, so what I'm trying
Hello?
to find out from you is what kind of policy or advocacy plan can we channel or design that can help support the youth who are actually striving for nationalistic growth?
I'm building a foundation. Let me bring you to the...
We don't have enough time, but then I need to,
Confab.
yeah.
The National Youth Confab has... Hello? You're talking about the policy. I'm giving you a policy right now, the National Youth Confab. Let's talk about it, because if you right now, they want to talk about any policy right now, is the National Youth Confab. So I say the best thing that the APC government has ever done for Nigeria is to create Ministry of Youths. That's the best thing they ever did. Finally, that I can say that this government did well. They created it. Finally, youth is different from sport. But we need to be genuinely interested about the progress of the youth. They are not. These older generations are not. I talked about policy. We have the not too young bill that's not a law now. You understand? Young people should get involved in governance and policy. Young people prefer to go and play NAS election and be doing PA and this thing. Young people prefer to just be succeeded to this older generation. We still prepare to... It's so sad. And young people should understand that in those days, those people that are ruling now, they were young people. The people that are ruling us now were young people. They were at time, they were our age grade. You understand? But they have made the system impossible that young people cannot even climb. Now they have weaponized hunger and poverty. And I want to tell every young person out there, enough is enough. Get involved in politics. You must get involved in politics. We have 19 political parties. Thank God that they have now the coalition. I saw you present political party. Political education is very, very important. After God is government.
Education.
We must get involved. We cannot just continue talking, be on keypad.
Okay.
Not be keypad warriors.
Maurice.
We must be patriotic enough to get involved in the system.
All right. Education, patriotism, and being involved. Thank you so much, Maurice Ebam, lawyer and human rights advocate, for joining us to talk about this. We appreciate that. I want to say a very big thank you to Odunayo Akinremi, who is a personal branding coach and history and strategic studies student at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for coming to our studios. And of course, Maiyegun Quam, who is an educator and a policy strategist. It was nice hearing from you also, Maiyegun. Thank you so much. All right, so what makes us who we are is a collection of our undeniable past, the true stories of our ancestry, and the passion they feel, and of course the vision they shape for our future. So as an African youth, it's time for us to tap into our roots and reveal our true identity so that the world may know and respect our existence. I am Lekon Obanjo. Thank you so much for being part of today's edition of Fafana Africa. And of course, you can catch up on this episode and several other episodes on our social media handle. Focal is at News Central TV. And of course, you can check us up on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Until some other time, I am Lekon Obanjo. Enjoy the rest of your day.